All right, well, let's get going here. Well, thank you so much, Ken, for stopping by the Journal offices for this interview. First question for you, what's motivating you to run for this seat on the county board?
My background is I was a state senator for 4 years, and a lot of what I worked on there was transportation, economic development, and environment and natural resources. I worked with the county board in the district that I represented, which was Southwest Minneapolis, Richfield, and East Bloomington. And a lot of what that would involved is transit-oriented development east of the Mall of America and Fort Snelling that Peter McLaughlin has been working on for quite a while. I think the things that I learned there and the things that I learned in the Senate, I was excited about them. I enjoyed doing that job. And in 2012, I got redistricted in with Senator Scott Dibble, who's a great senator, and I stepped aside, didn't think I could win with him, but was still looking for an opportunity to serve. I enjoyed the job in the Senate a lot. I'd still be there if it was up to me, but so.
All right. What would be your top priorities if elected commissioner?
If elected commissioner, I think the number one priority for Hennepin County is the fact that in the next 30 to 40 years there'll be 750,000 to 1 million more people in the metropolitan area, and if we're not planning ahead to accommodate those people both for transit options, housing that's affordable for all income levels, green space, and jobs, then we're going to inundate the quality of life that we have for the people that are currently here.
What other are some of the biggest challenges, in your opinion, that are facing Hennepin County?
Well, I think obviously dealing with the light rail has got to be one of the biggest things. And one of the things that to me is a major factor in that is we have to do it so it's affordable, so that other light rail lines have the money to move ahead, like Botno and some of the bus rapid transit systems that are going in place. Also probably streetcars on the Midtown Greenway. All of those things need to be, there's still more work to do and evaluating where they belong, but I think the biggest thing is we have to come to a conclusion on the Southwest Light Rail. I think the county's role in that is after the Met Council makes a decision as to what they're going to do, how they're going to do it, how can the county mitigate and help mitigate the problems of those people that are harmed. It's a county-wide asset that everybody in the county benefits, and not to try to step up and do what we can for those people that are harmed by this or inconvenienced or however else you want to put it, I think is just a disservice. So.
What would you say, the unique assets that you would bring to this role, kind of compared to the other candidates in the field? Number
one, longevity. I served for 15 years on the Minneapolis NRP Policy Board, so I'm very focused on community-oriented discussions and input. I think that if I were to say what I see for the future of Hennepin County, I'd like to build communities rather than just affordable housing buildings, and I think there's a way to do that. I think that the other thing is that my background because I've been so involved with both DFL politics and labor politics, and I have much more experience at the state Senate than the other candidates do, so my connections with state government and federal government and all the candidates over many, many years of being involved in politics at a variety of levels, I think is an asset to the position. So,
going back to the light rail issue, the City Council, the Minneapolis City Council, approved a resolution last week, opposing the co-location and a shallow tunnel option in the Kenworth corridor for Southwest Light Rail. What is your take on that?
Well, I think we're still in the posturing stage. I think at some point, there was a letter from Safety in the Park in the Minneapolis paper this morning talking about how they want to make it happen, but it has to be safe for St. Louis Park. I think one of the things that needs to happen is that I think Minneapolis City Council and St. Louis Park City Council need to get together, and they need to be walking on that light rail path and say, here's what we're asking you to give up, here's what you're asking us to give up, how do we come to some kind of conclusion, and if we can't get our way, what can we get instead that'll make this more appealing to the people that are going to be hurt by that, and who's going to pay for that. Those are some of the things that you have to do, I think.
Can you talk about some of the other transportation policies that you would advocate for as a commissioner?
Well, I'm a firm believer in the Complete Streets program. I also think that I think the light rail stations lend themselves to doing something similar to what the Midtown Greenway, which I call green corridors, where bikes and pedestrians have designated routes that aren't affected by the cars, but they will lead to and from those light rail stations so that they're not fighting cars that are going to be parking and ride. I'm kind of opposed to park and rides nearby the stations. I think there's a better use for that land and purposes for that. So that's one of the things that I think I'd like to see. I'd like to see more of the bike routes that are where the gaps are in some of the bike trails, get those connected in safe ways. I think that's important as well. So.
All right. Well, former Commissioner Dorfman was so lauded for her work on behalf of people experiencing homelessness.
Right.
Can you talk about what you would do to carry on that work and address the homelessness problem in the county?
Well, I'm firmly committed to the homeless issue in Hennepin County. I started out in the state senate. My first 2 years there, I chaired a subcommittee on housing, and we visited some homeless youth shelters here in the city. I visited almost all of them, I think, in Minneapolis. I think that we need to do more. I think we have to realize that we have to find places within the community. I'm a firm believer that we have to use mixed income levels in all our development to make sure that we don't focus poverty in one area of the city or cities, that was part of the Holman Decree back in the 90s, and it led to the development on the north side to some of that area, and I think it's one of those mistakes we don't want to repeat. So.
During the recent mayoral race and the council races, the issue that kept coming up again was the significant racial disparities and opportunity gaps. What would you do as a county commissioner to address the counties and kind of help with that effort to reduce disparities?
One of the things is I'm a believer in some of the demographics that we see. That just like the demographics say that we're going to have an increase in population, the other demographic that we have to realize is that the baby boomers are retiring at an ever increasing rate, and there's not enough warm bodies, let alone trained warm bodies, to fill those positions back up, and the economy that isn't growing will slowly deteriorate. And so those folks that are struggling to find work, we need to make sure that we have training. Now, that's not necessarily the role of the county, but I'm a firm believer that I think the county does have a role in education, in that there's social services that can support families at the school, and it's been there's been success shown in my other district in East Bloomington School. They put social services into the school. It brought the parents in, that immigrant population in particular, that weren't used to what education could do for a child, and re-emphasized the value of that education in that child's life and the stability at the school in that child's life. Even if the parents are moving, having that child stay in the same school was a huge benefit to that child. I think the county's role in that is to try to bring those things together. We work with the school board, the city, and law enforcement to try to make sure that families are supported.
Well, very good. Thank you so much for your time, Ken. Is there anything else that you'd like to say or add about your campaign?
Well, I would say that I think my focus is about building communities. I learned that as a policy board member on the NRP, that when communities come together, when you build and you look to try to build communities, that amazing things can happen. The NRP neighborhoods did amazing things, creative things that the city and county would never have thought of without that. I think that can happen and be replicated. I think some of the development ideas that I have as to how light rail stations should be developed, instead of looking at how many buildings we can build, how do we build a sense of community around those stations, is what my focus would be.
Okay, very good. Well, thank you so much for your time.
Well, that was easy.